This is what happened when the largest tractor company stopped selling tractors and started selling software subscriptions to the farmers who already owned the machines. Between 2000 and 2026, AI was pitched as agriculture's lifeline, a sector buckling under climate shocks, collapsing margins, and vanishing labor. The tools delivered measurable gains, the algorithms worked, and the corporations deploying them built something the farming world has never encountered before: a digital toll booth between every acre of soil and every dollar of profit. The stress in the base system is severe. 160,000 American farms have vanished since 2017, an 8% contraction in under a decade. Input expenses run 37.5% above historical baselines, while crop prices sit 5.4% below where they stood in January 2011. Costs climbed. Pricing power weakened. AI entered as an economic response to a structural crisis. Total factor productivity, the broadest measure of how agriculture converts resources into food, crawls forward at 0.74% per year. That number should concern anyone paying attention, because feeding nearly 10 billion people by 2050 demands a growth rate of 2.03%, almost 3 times the current pace. Agriculture already swallows more than 70% of all fresh water on Earth and accounts for 31% of greenhouse gas emissions. The challenge is not simply producing more output. It is producing more output without breaking the resource base. McKinsey puts the AI opportunity at $250 billion, $100 billion in direct on-farm value from labor efficiency, input precision, and yield gains, plus another $150 billion across the wider supply chain through logistics, sales, and operational coordination. Grower sentiment shifted from hype to what analysts now call operational realism. Producers ask one question: show me the return before the next shock hits. That mindset reframes every tool decision, and it explains why the history of precision agriculture matters right now. That history comes in 3 waves. Each wave carried promise. Each wave also exposed structural failure the sector paid billions to learn. Progress here has never been a straight line. GPS auto guidance and yield monitors formed the foundation. Early critics held that no farmer would surrender control of the steering wheel. Return on investment ended that argument quickly. Auto steer slashed operator fatigue and eliminated costly overlap in fuel, seed, and chemical passes while holding accuracy through dust, fog, and darkness. By decade's end, yield monitors reached 50% adoption on U.S. corn and soybean operations, and guidance systems graduated from aftermarket option to factory standard. Wave 2, spanning 2010 through 2020, generated enormous excitement and almost zero results. Farms accumulated yield maps, soil grids, and satellite imagery by the terabyte, and much of it sat dead. USB drives filled office drawers. Promised value stayed theoretical. Software from one manufacturer refused to communicate with software from another. Data existed, but stayed trapped inside brand-specific silos. Variable rate technology, or VRT, adjusts fertilizer and seed rates by exact field position. It has been sold commercially since the 1990s and promoted heavily by every major equipment maker. Regional adoption never broke past 20%. Calibration consumed hours. Data formats clashed across brands, and the agronomic algorithms meant to convert yield maps into profitable prescriptions consistently misfired. That decade hammered home an expensive truth. Collecting farm data is mechanically easy and increasingly cheap. Turning data into repeatable, reliable margin is far harder. Wave 3 starts around 2020, and it defines the current moment, a leap from passively collecting numbers to letting AI act on them in real time. USDA surveys from 2023 confirm the foundation was finally mature enough. Guidance ran on 52% of mid-size farms and 70% of large operations. Yield and soil mapping reached 68% among the biggest growers. Manufacturers sprinted toward computer vision, machine learning, and full autonomy. See and Spray Ultimate represents the sharpest edge of this push. Boom-mounted cameras scanning over 2,100 square feet per second at 15 miles per hour, feeding images into edge computing neural networks that distinguish individual weeds from crop plants in real time, firing herbicide down to the millimeter. 5 million engaged acres produced average chemical savings of 59% and eliminated an estimated 8 million gallons of tank mix. Autonomous tractors followed close behind. The Deere 8R series processes stereo camera imagery in 100 milliseconds, navigating fields, dodging obstacles, and executing heavy tillage without a human in the cab. But none of that marketing tells you what the peer-reviewed record actually shows. Strip away the press releases and examine the empirical data, and the environmental promises look far more fragile than any brochure admits. Researchers analyzed 444 published papers investigating precision agriculture and sustainability, and only 54, roughly 12%, contained actual field-level empirical evidence. Every other study built its claims on assumed efficiencies rather than measured outcomes. Nitrogen use efficiency offers a sharp example. A meta-analysis across 85 studies and 1,472 farm observations confirmed precision agriculture lifts nitrogen efficiency by 15.1%, generating a 22.3% return on investment. Those numbers are real. What the same body of research also reveals is that a separate review of 31 case studies comparing variable rate nitrogen against uniform spreading found yield differences that were largely negligible. Both approaches produced the same tonnage. Savings came from cutting fertilizer bills, not from growing more food. A machine learning analysis using XGBoost across 82 field studies exposed something more uncomfortable still. Rainfall, the amount and intensity of it, explained the vast majority of variability in nitrate leaching, accounting for up to 24 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. The management variables precision agriculture promotes most aggressively, source, timing, and spatial placement, carried far less statistical weight. One heavy storm can erase an entire season of precise nutrient planning. Herbicide outcomes tell a similar story with sharper teeth. Manufacturers claim precision sprayers cut total chemical use by 77 to 90%. An Iowa State University trial ran commercial See and Spray across 5 conventional soybean fields spanning 415 acres. Savings ranged from 90.6% on the cleanest field down to 43.9% on the worst. Average across all 5 came to 76%. That collapse to 43.9% exposes a dependency the sales pitch leaves out. Optical spot sprayers need the pre-emergent soil herbicide barrier to hold through early season. When spring rains washed that barrier away in the Iowa trial, weeds surged everywhere. The AI triggered nozzles continuously, and a machine designed for surgical precision reverted to blanketing the field like a standard broadcast sprayer. And this is where the real paradox kicks in, a pattern first identified by Stanley Jevons in 1865 while studying steam engines and coal. When higher efficiency lowered the unit cost of coal, total consumption did not fall. It exploded. Producers used more because each ton generated higher returns. Economists call this the rebound effect, and it maps directly onto precision agriculture. Precision irrigation is the clearest case. Sensor-driven drip systems deliver more crop per drop at field scale. Yet every basin-level analysis reaches the same conclusion. Total water use almost never declines. Because precision irrigation makes farming more profitable per acre, the rational response is predictable. Growers pivot toward water-hungry almonds or avocados. They expand irrigated acreage onto previously dry land. They pull harder from already stressed aquifers. Without binding basin withdrawal caps, precision irrigation operates purely as a profit optimizer that worsens aggregate depletion. The nitrogen rebound hits even harder. A European study tracked what happened when crop farms imported organic manure. On farm after farm, the manure did not replace synthetic fertilizer. Because precision technology lets growers chase the absolute ceiling of biological yield, they stacked organic inputs on top of existing synthetic baselines. For farms that imported manure without cutting chemical nitrogen, the mean rebound effect reached 520%. not a small overshoot, a five-fold worsening of the farm's total nitrogen balance. A sustainability intervention reversed direction at a scale nobody anticipated. If rebound risk were the only issue, this would still be a manageable technology story. The bigger shift is the corporate architecture being erected around these tools, and that turns it into something else entirely. $127.8 billion. That is the estimated size of the global farm machinery market. 4 companies dominate. John Deere commands roughly 17.5%. Kubota holds 11. CNH Industrial sits near 8.5. AGCO accounts for 7.2. None of them consider themselves tractor companies anymore. Each one is constructing a closed digital ecosystem engineered for continuous revenue extraction. First quarter 2025 exposed why the pivot accelerated. Deere's production and precision ag hardware revenue dropped 21% year over year. CNH Agriculture net sales cratered 23%. North American combine sales collapsed 51%. AGCO posted a 30% decline. Hardware is cyclical and margin sensitive. Subscription software is not. Once research and development amortizes, marginal reproduction cost approaches zero, and margins can exceed 80%. Deere logged more than 10,000 global Precision Essentials subscription orders in just the first half of fiscal 2025, surpassing all orders placed during the entire prior fiscal year. Retention landed at 66%, tracking towards 70%. CNH channels approximately $230 million per year into precision research, targeting that segment at 10% of total company revenue by 2030. The playbook mirrors enterprise software. Establish users through hardware, then monetize with recurring digital fees indefinitely. What separates this from ordinary software licensing is what happens when something breaks. Farmers who purchase high-tech machinery routinely discover they lack the digital rights to diagnose, repair, or modify equipment they legally own. That practice triggered a landmark antitrust suit from the Federal Trade Commission against John Deere in 2024, alleging systematic restriction of repair and diagnostic access to force farmers through authorized dealer networks. August 2025 escalated the confrontation dramatically. A federal judge ordered Deere's competitors, a GCO, CNH, and Kubota, to surrender their most closely guarded operational data for Deere's defense. Industry observers called this information the crown jewels, secret pricing structures revealing exact part markups, dealer profit margins exposing how much revenue flows from repairs versus equipment sales, internal strategy documents detailing precisely how each manufacturer engineers farmer lock-in. Deere's defense amounted to an extraordinary admission that restricting repairs and manipulating aftermarket economics is industry standard practice, not monopolistic behavior. Underneath the repair fight, a quieter crisis runs deeper. 59% of surveyed farmers cannot determine whether end-user agreements allow technology providers to monetize their data. 77% worry operational data could be turned over to government agencies for regulatory enforcement. 55% remain unsure whether they even retain legal ownership of data their own equipment generates. Farm data falls outside GDPR and the California Consumer Privacy Act because it is classified as non-personal, which means no protective legal framework exists. The term gaining traction among agricultural economists is digital sharecropper, a farmer who owns land and often owns machinery but leases AI, algorithmic instructions, and strategic insight from a corporate platform, while the platform harvests underlying data to train its models, strengthen its competitive position, and price inputs algorithmically, all without compensating the data source. That pricing risk is not theoretical. Bayer's Climate Field View now integrates with John Deere's Operations Center. When those platforms connect, granular field-level data, real-time soil conditions, historical yield maps, exact planting windows, flows directly back to input suppliers. Machine learning models built on random forest, gradient boosting, and XGBoost architectures achieve 88.46% accuracy in predicting individual farmer risk profiles and purchasing behavior. First-degree price discrimination becomes technically simple at that point. If an AI system identifies that a specific farmer's field will generate exceptionally high returns, the pricing engine can automatically adjust seed and fertilizer costs to capture maximum surplus, leaving the grower with just enough margin to continue operating. Farmers testifying before the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee described an environment where seeds, pesticides, and digital tools are bundled so tightly within consolidated corporate ecosystems that price transparency has effectively disappeared. Cybersecurity compounds every layer of this vulnerability. Crop production runs on biologically fixed timelines. A planting window cannot be paused. A harvest cannot be rescheduled. On May 5, 2022, AGCO suffered a ransomware attack that shut down production across multiple global facilities. Attacks on grain cooperatives and logistics hubs disrupted daily supply chain operations. Security researchers demonstrated that commercially available devices can execute Wi-Fi deauthentication attacks, instantly severing on-field sensors from the network and blinding autonomous equipment. GPS spoofing carries the potential to send multi-ton autonomous tractors off their mapped paths, destroying crops or endangering anyone nearby. Where a farmer sits in the value chain now determines whether any of this technology pencils out. A 3,000-acre row crop operation runs the numbers, and the math works. 2 precision sprayer upgrade kits cost approximately $56,000. Enterprise analytics at $3 per acre adds $9,000 annually. Starlink Business and a private IoT mesh require about $5,000 in hardware and $3,500 per year in fees. Year 1 total, roughly $73,500. A conservative 60% herbicide reduction across 3,000 acres at historical costs of $40 per acre saves $72,000. A 5% yield bump on 200 bushel corn at $4.50 per bushel generates another $135,000. Combined first-year benefit exceeds $207,000. Full payback arrives before the next planting season. A 500-acre specialty crop operation carries heavier upfront weight. A laser weeding robot runs $1.2 million, but traditional hand weeding costs $900 per acre, and the robot drops that to $267, a savings of $632 per acre. Multiply across 500 acres, and annual labor savings reach $316,000, with pest detection capabilities preserving an additional $250,000 in crop value. Payback stretches to 2.5 to 3 years, but the return still justifies the capital. For a 200-acre family farm, which represents the majority of American operations by count, the equation falls apart. Heavy robotics are unaffordable. A basic drone mapping kit at $5,000, paired with per-acre software at $5, generates roughly a 12% input reduction, worth about $10 per acre, $2,000 per year. That dollar figure rarely justifies the time and complexity of learning an entirely new digital workflow. Advanced AI sits permanently out of financial reach. And as large operations exploit technology to drive down unit costs, they accumulate surplus capital to outbid smaller neighbors for increasingly scarce land rents. Precision agriculture has quietly become one of the most powerful engines of farm consolidation. Globally, the disparity sharpens into something closer to outright exclusion. Smallholder farms under 2 hectares represent 84% of all farms on Earth, cultivate 12% of agricultural land, and produce 35% of the world's food. Across sub-Saharan Africa, farms averaging 1.6 hectares supply 35% of regional calories. Absent broadband infrastructure, facing persistent digital literacy gaps, and confronting annual platform subscriptions between $500 and $2,000, these producers face barriers that no amount of technological refinement can lower on its own. The AI revolution in agriculture threatens to systematically price the world's smallest farmers out of competitive markets. Alternatives do exist. Farmer-owned data cooperatives are organizing to resist the centralization of agricultural data power. Member-owned cooperative businesses in the United States generated $322.6 billion in combined revenue during 2024. Platforms like GrownBy enable farmers to pool agronomic data collectively, train localized AI models calibrated to their own soil and climate conditions, and retain ownership of the financial value their aggregated datasets create. GrownBuy transitioned in 2023 into a multi-stakeholder cooperative where users and employees hold direct ownership stakes. 3 scenarios define how this plays out by 2030. Under the first, consolidated proprietary oligopoly. Current trends continue unchecked. 3 to 4 massive OEMs maintain closed ecosystems. Right to repair legislation fails. AI model development grows too capital-intensive for independent challengers. Farmers gain genuine operational efficiencies, but watch margins compress relentlessly as cost savings flow upward through algorithmic price discrimination and escalating software subscriptions. The independent farmer becomes a managed input in someone else's value chain. Under the second, open source and interoperable ecosystems. Antitrust enforcement compels OEMs to open their application programming interfaces and adopt standardized data protocols. Ag data transparent certification evolves from voluntary badge to regulatory mandate. Farmers retain sovereignty over their data and benefit from competitive, transparent pricing. Independent dealerships rebuild as brand-agnostic technology integrators. Under the third, decentralized data cooperatives and sovereign networks. Farmers collectively refuse to surrender data to OEMs. Large-scale cooperative pools train proprietary, localized AI models. Farmers monetize their own data. Pooled purchasing power neutralizes algorithmic pricing entirely. Equipment manufacturers are permanently reduced to hardware providers competing on margins. The algorithms work. Nitrogen use efficiency climbs 15.1%. Herbicide volume drops up to 76% under optimal conditions. A single operator manages multiple autonomous machines across thousands of acres simultaneously. None of that changes the core problem. Without binding regulatory caps on resource extraction, environmental promises evaporate under the rebound effect. Economic gains concentrate overwhelmingly in operations large enough to absorb heavy capital outlays. And the corporate governance architecture surrounding this technology transfers value, by design, from the farmer to the platform. $250 billion hangs in the balance. The question it poses is whether the farmer will capture that value or be consumed by it. The algorithms are already deciding. The farmers are not writing the code.